Hi, everybody. Dr. Skinner with you today. I'm going to be answering a couple of your questions from this week's Q&A on facing fear. I hope you've had a good week. This is one of my favorite topics in terms of how to deal with some of the difficult things that we're dealing with. And as we deal with the facing fear, one of the common themes that I hear from people is, hey, I'm trying to do this, but I'm bumping into these glitches, or what do you do in this situation? So today we've got a couple of really good questions on what to do when. So let me jump right into them and say thank you for your questions this week. And I hope you've had a good week of facing the storms, and hopefully we're turning into buffaloes. So this question today comes from Healing Daily. She says, Dr. Skinner, thank you for the buffalo style conversation examples you shared in Wednesday's video. I want to become so good at thinking and communicating in these buffalo ways that is second nature to me. In this week's Q&A, could you comment on how to continue the conversation in a buffalo-like way if your partner responds to your vulnerability by inflicting more wounds? And for example, if I say, when you look at the other women and it hurts and I feel like I'm not enough for you, and he says something like, well, you're paranoid. I wasn't looking at other women, and if you want to be enough, then do the things in bed I want you to do. Now, this wannabe buffalo can't see clearly enough to do anything but remove herself from the unsafe, emotionally abusive situation. And so let me just respond to what you just described there. If you're that kind of vulnerable, which is buffalo-like, and you get a response like, and you notice there's two issues there. You came with, I'm not comfortable with the way you're looking at others in public, and he came with, well, then do what I want. So it was actually two specific issues there. When you were trying to talk about what it's like in public, and he shifted that into what you do in bed. And really that shift is not hearing your concern and truly non-valuing. Just honestly, that's not respecting you as a human being, and it's putting it all in bed, not into this is creating fear inside of me. So I understand completely removing yourself from the unsafe environment. If those are constant statements towards you, then his focus on his sexuality is not going to allow you guys to have a deep and intimate relationship. So a buffalo-like response there is, what I'm saying, and you keep saying, I'm paranoid. Well, I have evidence to be worried, and it doesn't help me when you then say, well, let's just do this in bed and it won't be a problem. And that makes me feel like our relationship is all about sexuality and pleasing your needs and not addressing the other things that I'm feeling, like fear and worry. So we can't have a close relationship when you respond to me that way. That would be a buffalo-like charging into it response. Another response might be something to the effect of, if that's all you want from me, then our relationship isn't as important to you as I thought it might be. I want a better relationship, but we can't connect if you're going to just shift it to that. I'm trying to be open with you. I'm trying to share my concerns. But whether you are or aren't, it's still concerning to me because these are the things I'm observing. And then you would want to identify the things that you've observed. But in a relationship where you're not being treated with respect and dignity, it is appropriate to create boundaries. And if you don't feel safe, then connection is not an option. And so I guess I would say to you, continue being strong. And if things don't change, then that unsafe environment, you're going to have to consider, do I stay in this or not? Because if it truly is narcissism, then he's not going to see you. He's not going to understand you. He's not going to be able to identify with your worries or your fears. It's going to be about him and his needs, because that's usually how it works when individuals are really narcissistic, because it's more focused on their needs. Now, if he can hear your pain, if he could hear your suffering or your concerns or your worries and not become defensive, then he would show respect and understanding of what you're saying. So that's what I would want, and that's what I would expect that would be helpful for you guys. But as long as he becomes defensive and then shifts the topic to what he wants, then really you guys are going to spin your wheels, because he's not hearing you and he's wanting what he wants in the bedroom. And again, that's sexual intimacy is one version of intimacy, but clearly we have to learn the other forms of intimacy if we're going to have a deeper bond. So at this point, I guess my core point is he's going to need to learn if you guys are going to have a connection to hear you, and you're going to need to continually have that voice and be strong. So it's extremely hard where you're at, and so you're going to need to continue to be strong and continue to get support around you and a team around you if that's the way he's going to talk to you. Uh, that he's not seeing you for who you are. All right. The next question today, in fact, our final question. We just had 2 questions, and this is reactions to the buffalo. And CEOT17 says, you gave some good examples of how a buffalo would respond in Wednesday's video. My question is, what do I do if my husband then denies my concerns? If he says, I'm not looking at other women, or I help you all the time. I did the dishes once last week. Well, all the time is actually the once, but anyway, that's just neither here nor there. When we don't get the response that we want, how would the buffalo react to that? I would also appreciate more cow and buffalo example responses them this week. I used to think that getting angry was a buffalo response, but now I'm seeing that it's not. Thanks. Getting angry is an emotion that may or may not be buffalo-like. Sometimes the anger is an emotion that helps us express what we want, but it usually or rarely gets us a connection to understand one another. So in order for me to really answer your question with more examples of cows and buffaloes, you're going to need to understand that some context, if I put it in the context, some context you're going to need to be stronger, and that voice may come across as anger, but in reality, you want to identify your core hurts, your core emotions, and you want to communicate in a vulnerable position of, I want to connect, but I can't do that when these behaviors are occurring. So you're being clear on what you're hoping for, the desired change. You're also not letting being then the buffalo may require you to set boundaries. So let's just take, for example, looking at other women, and whether he identifies it or not, but it's the ability to say something when you're uncomfortable. It's the question of, I'm not sure what's happening, but I feel uncomfortable in this environment. I see the way, at least it feels like you're looking at people, and I'm uncomfortable. You don't want to ignore that. You do want to bring it up if it's there. Let's say then he denies it. Then my response in that situation would be, I'm just telling you my concern and how I feel, and it makes me want to pull back. And I want a relationship to be better. I want a connection, but I can't. I'm not enough, because that's what it makes me feel like, is that I'm just simply not enough. I want to be enough for you. I want to hear me, that I'm hurting. And in this environment, I want to be with you. And it would help me if we were connecting here, because I think we could have a better marriage if we were. That would be a buffalo response. A cow response might be to ignore it, to avoid the conversation altogether, because it might create conflict. The cow response in that situation is lengthening it out, because you're feeling the fears, but you're shoving it down, you're ignoring it, you're avoiding it, thus placing you in the storm a little bit longer. Again, it doesn't have to be in that very environment. You might wait a few minutes to a context where maybe there aren't children around, or where it's just the two of you, and you can say, I've got a situation, I don't know what to do, because in this environment, I start feeling this way, I start experiencing these things, and I'm observing, and I don't know if you're looking at the other women, but it sure feels that way. And it looks to me like I'm with you, but I'm not important to you. That's what it's feeling like. And if you have an open enough relationship, you might ask a few questions like, what is it happening there? Because I feel like we're not there, we're not connected. I mean, if we were holding hands, if you were talking with me, or you're present with me, I would feel more comfortable. And see, now you're giving solutions, and you're heading into the storm, not being afraid to have hard conversations. Then we talk about, this idea of, I help you all the time. I did the dishes last week. Then that's really an expression of, when you do the dishes, it's really helpful. And maybe what I'm just saying is, I need more, or I'd like more support. And I want, and again, if you're too busy, if you're tired, I understand, but I too am tired. And it helps to have help. And when you do those things, it is beneficial and it really helps me. So I want to express my appreciation for when you do it. I just, at times, I need more. And uh, those statements are, I'm not, again, not being defensive, it's just an encouragement. These things are helpful when you do them. Let me say one other thing about your final statement of getting angry. Anger is an emotion that we feel when we want to be heard. It usually is not the core hurt or the vulnerable place that we're coming from with anger. It's a way of communicating, hoping that it will get their attention, that it will create change. Ideally, we would assess or analyze our anger, what's underneath the anger, and then come at it. We would come at it from a position of, I better at this, or I want a better relationship. So you're creating a situation where you're having a more direct conversation rather than the anger guiding it. Because when anger is communicated, rarely does the receiver hear what's being said because they're so attuned to the emotion, so they're not able to hear the content. And in this environment where you identify the hurt, you're more prone to be able to say and be heard, say what you want, and be heard effectively. That's a harder thing to do and to practice. So it's a good idea to practice in your mind. How do I want to say this? And how might I respond if he responds in a negative way, or if he says, okay, tell me more. Couples need to learn how to communicate. And this is one of my core messages today. I really believe that we as a society need to learn to be more effective with each other, more open, more vulnerable, communicate more effectively. And some of the core ways that we do that is actually from the kindness of our heart. We have the ability to be kind and still take a stand. For example, I want a better relationship, but I don't know how to do that when we're disconnected and you're struggling. And so those are the things that we want to continue to work and be open about. Is I want a connection, but I don't know how to do that in this environment. All right, so let me now close by just saying thanks to everybody for your questions. Thanks for being a part of Bloom for Women. And as I close today, I just want you to know that as you go through these experiences, you can become a buffalo. You can face those fears. You can have hard conversations. And as you do so, you will find more strength. It's not going to be perfect. Don't expect perfection. There's going to be days where you find, it might have been a cow response because I didn't face that fear. I didn't have that hard conversation. Or I did hold my anger and I communicated from my heart and I feel better. Track it, observe how you're doing, share your experiences of success with each other. And again, thank you for being here on Bloom. I encourage you to participate in the forum, get support from each other. And as I often will close out, have a good, fantastic, outstanding, marvelous, extraordinarily great week. And Brett will be with you guys next week. Have a great week.